Hi everyone, welcome to the STEM Girl channel. I am Jennifer the STEM Girl, and today we are talking about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a really fascinating thing to happen to any individual. So it tends to happen to women, minorities that are in a job that they don't tend to be in usually, and high achievers. So it's the feeling that your classmates or your peers are going to think you're a fraud, and that they're going to find out that you just don't belong there, that you never knew what you were doing, and that you need to leave immediately. And it's a fascinating thing that happens because it happens so quickly. When we were in high school, we were just choosing our courses, and I chose computer engineering. I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I knew I liked computers. I'm like, computer engineering makes complete sense. Except computer engineering is actually about hardware. So it's not about coding or programming or anything like that. It was about the hardware inside the computer. So knowing how everything worked inside, what chips and magnets and everything that was inside the actual computer. And I didn't know that. So when I first got into the class, it was like in this dusty part of the school that nobody ever went to. When I entered, dust moths flew out because nobody was ever in there. And when I got in there, it was only boys. It was a guy teacher, it was guys of different races, but it was only guys. And I had never been in a situation where I was the only girl in something. And by the time I got into the class, they were already playing with parts and things like that, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna understand what's happening. All the boys were already playing with the parts. I'm like, I don't even know what a part is, and I dropped the class immediately. And it's kind of fascinating how sure I was and how decisive I was in my mental thought that I'm like, okay, I don't look like anyone in the class, so obviously I can't learn the content, which is a fascinating train of thought because one really doesn't relate to the other. Just because you don't look like anyone in a situation really has nothing to do with you being able to learn the content. And I left that class so quickly. I just dropped it and I went into a computer science class, and luckily there was a bit more diversity there, so I learned to code in my grade 11 class. But it would have been really cool in retrospect to understand how computers worked on the inside. But as soon as I got in the class and saw nobody that looked like me, I dropped it instantly. So, and that's what was happening to me at the time, imposter syndrome. I just felt like I was a fraud and that they would all call me out and not belonging there. So I dropped the class. Now, the interesting thing about imposter syndrome is that it happens despite academic achievement. So you could have done great in all your classes, and that's what happened for me. I had done really well in all my classes. I had gotten high enough grades to get into the class in high school, and despite all that, I thought that I wasn't good enough to do it. And the society that you live in makes a really big difference. Your learning experiences and the people around you really shape who you turn out to be. You shape your personality as you're learning through these experiences, and the society you're in, where you're living, and the impact of the people around you makes such a difference. For example, right now, with everything happening in the world, with the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of Black people are hurting and they're going through a lot and they're scared. And this, it doesn't only follow through in protests and things like that. It follows through in stunting your academic achievement because you feel like you're in a society where you just don't belong and people don't think that you should be there in the first place. So as a Black girl in engineering, or as a Black person or any person of color trying to navigate their way through an experience or through a career where there are not many people that already look like you, it can be daunting and it can be really scary to think to yourself, I don't belong here, I don't have the qualifications. And the problem is that there's usually a learning curve when you get into an environment where you have never done the activity before, like it's a new job or it's a new class. There's a learning curve where you have to, and it can take time, where you have to figure out what everybody else knows and get in touch with the lingo, know the acronyms that everybody's using. And through this entire learning curve journey, the whole time you're thinking to yourself, I don't know anything. And if you're already in a position where either you're a high achiever or a minority, and you're already in a position where you're thinking to yourself, I should know what I'm doing, it becomes a confidence issue. So you start to lack confidence because you think to yourself, well, I don't know as much as this person. But truth is, you're learning, and as experience comes and as you gain more ideas on the topic, you become that person who's knowledgeable. And One thing that I've found really helps is feedback. I find as pairs, we don't give each other enough positive feedback. It's very easy to get critiqued on something and someone to tell you, well, you should do this better. But we always have to remember to give each other positive feedback. And it really helps in making you, in kind of dispelling the imposter syndrome and making you feel like, oh, I do belong. I learned this. And every time you get a little bit more positive feedback, or one of your pairs says, oh, hey, you did a really good job, it really helps in making you feel like you belong. So if you're ever in a situation personally where you know what it feels like to have that imposter syndrome, and you see someone else that might be having it or might be lacking in confidence, giving them positive feedback as well as constructive criticism where they can actually become better helps a lot. One thing that I've found about imposter syndrome is it's not talked about very often. It's not something that you discuss, so you kind of just weather it on your own. You don't necessarily talk to anybody about it, and it's kind of a shameful feeling where you're thinking to yourself, who can you even talk to about the fact that you don't feel like you belong in a place? So empathizing with people is something that really helps in sort of dispelling the imposter syndrome, trying to see it from their perspective. If you're in a room with somebody who's either a minority or you can tell they're new and they're just not sure of themselves, empathizing and then bringing them into the fold and saying, oh, hey, look at this, did you know this? And teaching them really helps in dispelling the imposter syndrome. And empathy can be a difficult thing to do, especially if you've never experienced what the person is going through. For me, a really good example is writing. Writing is such an elusive skill that it's not necessarily clear when you're doing well in it. For example, if you're doing a math problem or if you're doing calculus, you know at the end what the final answer should be. Even if you do it a different way than what you've been told, than how you've been told to do it, you'll still end up with the final answer. But for me, when I write my children's books or when I'm working on a novel, I sit down and it's hard for me to tell whether or not I'm doing well in it. And another thing is there's not many children's books that are written by Black authors, and if you don't empathize with that idea, it'll be hard to see it from the perspective of someone trying to do it new. I had to convince myself that it was okay to write, that I was a good writer, that I could push on and I could edit, because the entire time I thought to myself, is there a thing where Black authors just don't know how to write, or how come there's not that many? And it's very easy to internalize that idea. It's very easy to internalize when you don't see someone that looks like you in a certain field. So essentially you can't be what you can't see. So if you're ever in a situation where someone, again, is just new or they look different from everybody else, it's really helpful to empathize with the idea that they may not feel like they're even the right person for the job just because of what they look like. And like I said earlier, one has nothing to do with the other, but it's still a feeling that comes. So, as I said before, giving positive feedback helps, and also remembering your positive experiences. People always tend to forget about their achievements or the things you've learned. It's the curse of knowledge for all intents and purposes. You get your degree and then you just assume everybody knows what you know. So when you get into this new place or this new environment where you don't look like everybody else, you tend to forget all the things that you've already achieved to get to where you are, because you're qualified, right? If you're in the room, if you're in the class, if you're in the university program, you got there because you were qualified, you were good at it. So just remember your positive experiences with people of different races, with teachers that told you, hey, you did a great job. So just remembering that you've had good experiences. And another thing that I find is really helpful is remembering the impact you bring. You might not see it, but your perspective is so unique and so specific to you that you can bring so much value to a situation where you're the only one that thinks like you do, or you're the only one that's experienced something. So just remember how your different experiences bring a whole wealth of value to any situation, because you see things from a different perspective. So if you're ever getting that feeling that you just don't belong, or everybody's gonna see you're a fraud, push past it, fight past it, be confident, learn the content, and really just appreciate your experience and all the things that you've achieved. You're doing a great job, you're not an imposter, and you belong. Thank you guys for watching my video about imposter syndrome, and watch out for the next one, which is about modeling during COVID and how being inclusive and having different people of different cultures, different races, and different backgrounds can really help us model and see different perspectives. During a time like COVID, everybody keeps talking about modeling, but what is it? How is it done? And are we really using the wealth of experience that we have to make sure that we're getting the most accurate predictions in terms of modeling and understanding how everything is working, not only in COVID, but just how to make decisions based on modeling. And modeling is a really, really, really cool feat of engineering and science and math really just mixed together. So watch out for my next video. Please like or subscribe and share with anyone you think might like it. Have a good one, guys. Bye.